Greetings. Welcome to Powered by Nyame. I'm your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu. On this episode, our focus will be a question that I hear often, both related to this channel and, of course, off the record from this channel. And that is, am I built to become, or can I be made into a healer and a spiritualist? Before we get to the heart of that question, first, some background, some context. Almost all indigenous communities across the world, including Africa, the Americas, and other parts of the world, had, and in some cases still have, at least one healer within the family and at least within the community. This was the case writ large precisely because healers were, and in some cases still are, the first line of defense against illness and disease. And so they were both the physician, they were the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the therapist, they were the marriage and birth officiants, they were the rites of passage conductant, if indeed the society had a male and or female rites of passage process, and much more. These individuals were multiverse, that is, they occupied multiple positions within their families, within their communities, and therefore provided for the therapeutic, spiritual, health, and community needs of their particular society. That background sets up then, can a healer be made, or are they born with the abilities to heal and to be a spiritualist? Let's start with the process of birth so that we can see if in fact healers are born rather than made, or both. Healers of any caliber, any kind, have to undergo some form of acculturation, also known as training. I don't like the word training because dogs are trained rather than human beings. But suffice to say, for this conversation, I might use the word training to refer to the processes in which the potential or prospective healer gains particular skills and knowledges by someone other than themselves. And that someone could be both in the flesh or in the spirit, or both. We are all born with a self-healing capacity within all of us as human beings. Our body is a healing machine. Our bodies will heal when we sleep, when we get rest. Our bodies will go into healing automation mode to repair damaged cells, to replace them, to deal with certain kinds of illnesses that may be afflicting us, both those seen and felt and those unseen and felt, or those that are on their way, such as a cold virus, which in fact takes some time to get acclimated to the body to detect it as a threat and as a virus. And so healing is indeed built into all of our bodies, built into our DNA, and it's on automation. In fact, the human body and the human being is a exceptional machine and specimen when it comes to self-healing power and therapy. And so all of us have the ability to heal ourselves. And so in one sense, at a very general and perhaps a very superficial level, by superficial I don't mean unimportant or lesser than, but simply superficial, meaning that these are not specialists, specialized skills and capacities that one may have in terms of the power to heal others than yourself, and to do so over a long period of time. And so superficially, we're all born with the self-healing capacity through our bodies, through our being, to deal with any of those microscopic or other kinds of threats that come to us. Now, there are threats and matters that are beyond simply superficial that require the skill and the acumen of someone who is quote unquote trained to deal with these matters. And that's where healers and spiritualists come in. Now, to be clear, take the matter of witchcraft, or what some may call obia or bayi or science, or you name it. those kinds of nefarious acts, or acts to do harm or wickedness or the like, they don't require the skill or the temperament or being born with the power to heal and to be a spiritualist, meaning anyone can go get some candles, anyone can go get some dust or powder or oils and follow a recipe spell book, or do something that they saw on TV or a friend told them to, and go to carry out a spell or carry out a particular form of quote-unquote witchcraft. And so that requires no particular divinely enabled or activated powers to do so. Anyone can do that. So just to be clear, engaging in whether it's minor or major forms of so-called witchcraft does not require spiritual abilities or skills. It doesn't. So I want to put that off the table, even though a real, authentic spiritualist and healer can do the work of a so-called wielder of witchcraft. Now, that being put to the side, yes, most people who are or become healers and spiritualists are born with the capacity and with the ability and with the power to heal and to do spiritual work. However, they all have to undergo some form of formal or informal schooling or learning in terms of how to manage and deal with their power, the limits and consequences of their power, as well as how to deal with the various kinds of material and immaterial, that is spiritual forces, figures, and individuals who dabble within that world, that is other healers and spiritualists. And so even though a person has to be born, they have to have the capacity and the ability, even if their full powers have not come into bloom as yet, that is, the flower have not blossomed as yet, the seed, the nucleus, and the substance is there and was always there from birth. And so yes, spiritualists and healers are actually born. Now, a part of them is also made. Now, made in several ways. One way is that individuals who are deemed or viewed to have some healing and spiritual capacity and ability will undergo some form of what we call initiation, or a way to put them under medicine, that is, put them into the elders and other guides that will take them through and grow them in terms of their close connection with the spiritual forces and figures that ride with them, that roll with them, but also to give them certain kinds of tools to deal with the inevitable mishaps and consequences of having those kinds of powers, and other people having similar powers that do spiritual work that is not always of a really positive and productive nature. And so so-called training is to equip the person with certain kinds of temperament, certain kinds of skills, certain kinds of knowledges that will allow them to maximize the capacity and the powers they already have. But key thing that they have to have, at least in my view and in my book, if I'm to work with someone of that kind, they have to have the power within them already, or they have to have the ability and capacity already. And my job, therefore, like any person who is to guide them and carry them through their own process, is to teach them certain skills, but is to actually maximize and enhance what's already there, which means something has to be there to maximize. And that's really how most elders, in my experiences, both within the West African context and within the African diaspora in the Americas and other parts of the world, that I'm familiar with through experience and or through deep study, or both. That said, there are other ways to maximize and learn that doesn't involve other human beings, meaning elders or guides, to bring one through the skill and knowledges and abilities and power that they already have within them. And that is the spiritual forces that may walk with, talk with, and engage this person, typically at a younger age. And it can be in dreams or their walking state. In fact, it can often be both. And so those figures and forces will actually be their teachers, will be their book, will be their open book, in fact, that will show them how to do this and that, that will then open up the playbook, if you will, and say, hey, you can do this and this and this and this and then this, or you can do it this way or that way. And it is that process whereby they would get some of the same sort of substance and content, going through some of the similar curriculum as they would a physical human elder or elders guiding one through. But in this case, the figures are in fact spiritual in nature, that is, are spiritual beings that is guiding one both in their waking state, both through their capacity to hear and to see. That is, they have to hear and to see. Now, we all see because we have eyes as human beings, but we don't see the same way. And so people who have the capacity to heal and to be spiritualists, they have the ability to see things that the ordinary person, ordinary eyes cannot see. And they can hear that the ordinary ears of a person cannot hear. They'll also be able to sense or feel. They'll also be able to basically house or carry the force of, or the spiritual being other than themselves. In other words, they will be able to go into so-called trance, and I don't like that word, so my preference is they'll engage in sort of spiritual communion, meaning their bodies become the host for another consciousness, another set of energy or energies in their bodies, using all their faculties, eyes, ear, nose, and senses, to be able to communicate to whomever needs to be communicated with in that moment. And so the healer has to have, the would-be healer has to have all those capacities to be able to see, to hear, to feel or sense, and also be able to house or carry the spiritual being or figure that is other than themselves, as outside their own bodies, to be able to accommodate it and to allow it to essentially speak through and act through and be through their particular being, that is using all their senses while that spirit is inside of them. Now, while the spirit is there, and I can tell you from experience, it's not really something to be terrified about. It's actually very simple, and actually it's cool too. Once the spiritual being or figure, or in short, the spirit, enters the body, of that person, it's really like watching, a movie, where you're in the movie theaters or in your home and you're sitting on your couch or the seats in the theater and you're watching the movie, but the movie is real life as it's happening. So you're sort of sitting there, or in some cases, your spirit may in fact go to sleep, or it may go somewhere. It may travel somewhere, as the spirit does when you go to sleep anyway. So the spirit may travel and go somewhere. It's like going to, maybe say, like a waiting lounge while that spirit is inside of you. Now, while your spirit has left your body, or it's in the waiting room, if you will, you are not fully aware of what's going on, though you may pick up on some things, while it's happening. But for the most part, you cannot hear or see what the spirit is saying or doing while you are in the waiting room. And so oftentimes that a healer or spiritualist will get out of a so-called trance state and they won't remember much of what happened. And that's how, A, you will know that that person is for real and is authentic, and B, you will also know, if you are the healer spiritualist, that you have the capacity to accommodate and to house, at least temporarily, a spirit, within the confines of your being, within your body. And so you can have spiritual forces and figures that will actually train you, that will actually give you certain insights, certain even recipes to do this particular spell or that particular spiritual work or that particular ritual. And by doing so, it opens up your playbook. It opens up that capacity that you already have. And it opens up and it even activates and in some cases increases your powers, right? Depending on the kind of work you do. Now, limitations and consequences to that power that you have. The power, like any power in the world, can be used and it can be abused. And use and abuse is a thin line between them. What is the thin line? It's intention. What is your intention as a healer and a spiritualist, if indeed you have the capacity and ability to do that kind of work? there has to be limits on all forms of power. Take, for example, electricity that is mobilized through an electric grid, and that enters, our homes, that enters our vehicles through the car battery or another power source. These particular ways in which electricity operates, they're all bounded, meaning they're all contained. They have to have a limit on it, because if electricity is not contained and limited, it can be destructive. It can be violent, very violent, like lightning, for example, right? When it strikes and hits a tree or hits something, or hopefully not someone, but that's very possible. So like electricity, like lightning, one's spiritual powers have to have limits and consequences, because in fact it can corrode the person who has it. I'll give an example. People who do witchcraft, who have spiritual capacity and abilities, not those who simply just go buy some candles and some oils, they, in fact, their complexion will change. It literally will get darker, right, in complexion, the more they engage in the kind of witchcraft kind of work. Because their soul is getting darker, right? Because they're doing nefarious work. And as such, their being, their persona, gets more darker, right? Notice I didn't say black, but darker. Because essentially, the more they're engaged in that world and the work of that world, nefarious world, the more their soul and their being and their heart becomes more corroded. It becomes much more violent, and it can lead to the demise of that individual, right? And so when a spiritualist and healer does not limit or confine or heed the consequences of their powers, there are dire outcomes, both for him or her and for those people who they're working for. And so the capacity and the ability to heal are two different things. One, the capacity means you have the infrastructure, if you will, to do healing and spiritual work. The ability is then the power to activate or to make good in the capacity. How do you get that power? Even if you're born with it, you may not have your full powers until you are an adult and even later in life. I've known very dear elder minds who trained or developed her full spiritual powers in her 60s, right? And this is a elder minds from Ghana, West Africa. And so there are people who engage in the process of training, either physical or spiritual beings or both, as adolescents. They're 13, 12 years old, right? And so there's a wide range in which one will enter the process of activating or making good on the capacity to heal and do spiritual work. But having the capacity doesn't mean having the ability to do. You need both capacity and ability, which means you need to be empowered. Who gives you that power? Ultimately, that power comes from Nyame. Hence, a person is born with the capacity to do so. But they have to be granted by Nyame signing off, and then the spiritual forces and people, in this case I mean spiritual beings, that accompany and ride with and guide that person in their temporal or human experience. So they have to be granted both their full powers and increasing powers, depending upon what is their particular purpose and mission in this lifetime, which of course boils down to whatever conversation Nyame and that person had while in their mother's womb, right? About who they're going to be in their human experience. And so, can you be made a healer? The answer is no. Can you do rituals without being a healer? The answer is yes. Be careful, be mindful that there are consequences to that, especially if one does not really have the ability to undo what they have done. And I've seen plenty of that throughout my lifetime and throughout my experience doing this kind of work, this healing work. That there are people who engage in the rituals, who will follow what they saw someone do, who will essentially do what they may do to learn a new dance step. They'll see it at the club, go home, practice it, and go back to the club and start doing it. And what those people fail to realize is that it's one thing to copy what you think you see, but it's another to have the capacity and power to activate the ritual itself. So one part is actually, yes, there's a physical material part to the ritual that anyone can notice and see for themselves. But if you don't have the spiritual capacity to activate the ritual, that is to make it do precisely what it's intended to do, and to have the communication links to ensure that whoever comes, and by whoever I mean the spiritual being comes to take the work to carry it out, and along the way have the ability to troubleshoot and to guide the work to make sure it gets to its ultimate end, then there are serious trouble and consequences awaiting that person. So just because you see someone do it doesn't mean you yourself has the capacity and or the ability to do so. So be very careful and be very mindful, and kindly consult someone who is reputable, who is trustworthy, and who has shown through their resume to be of quality character, and of course have the power to do what they say they can do. Now, before we wrap up on this question, and if you have had this kind of question, then this concluding portion will be for you as well. And so in closing this question of how are healers made? Are they born with it? Can they be trained? Can they be schooled? Can they go to study under someone who's already a spiritualist healer and gain from them? The answer is yes and no to all those loaded questions. Yes, you can become an understudy, like an intern, and you will pick up on certain rituals to do, and you can be very good at a few rituals. But it doesn't make you a healer and a spiritualist, because a spiritualist, in fact, is one who can not only do the ritual, but also undo it. And I've seen this plenty of time where people will do a ritual, but they can't undo it. Or they will do it incorrectly and don't know it's incorrectly because there's no other spiritual force of being talking to them, or if it is, they can't hear it, they can't see them, and therefore, even if they need to be corrected in the moment or soon thereafter, they can't, because they can't see or hear. And so, yes, one can learn certain rituals. Yes, one can learn certain skills. Yes, one can, be empowered to do some basic things, for themselves and perhaps, for others. But it's another to have the capacity and have the ability to do that kind of work for a community, for a village, for an entire society of people that will count on you and count on your abilities and your powers to do so at the snap of a finger, at a drop of a dime, right? That's where real healers and real people who have the ability come in. And so that can't be trained. It's really at that moment, and I don't mean to be callous, but I'm going to be forthright with you. Either you have it or you don't. And that's just the real part of it, because we're not all designed to be healers. It's like we're not all designed to be doctors. We're not all designed to be mechanics. We're not all designed to be professors. We're designed to be whoever we came here to be, not to be that, but to carry out a particular purpose. And so even being a healer is a misnomer, because indeed what a healer or a spiritualist as a placeholder is called here to do in their human experience is to do the work of Nyame, is to do the work of why they were sent here in the first place, right? Now that may fall under the category of healing and spiritual work, but that's not who they are, right? The same way we're not called here to be lawyers and doctors, but to do the work of the people that are named so. And so, to recap, yes, you can be born, and you need to be born with the capacity, but also the ability. And yes, there are some that were born the capacity, and they may be delayed or they not be granted the ability until later on in life. And that's something between them and Nyame, and between them and their ancestry. That's nothing between anyone else that matters, because only those forces and spirits can grant the partial full powers of that person, but also to take it away. So it is very much part of the package of consequences where indeed a person's power can be reduced and removed if in fact they're not doing what they were called here to do, what they came here to do in this marketplace called this earth. For Powered by Nyame, I've been your guide and host, Grace Kunadu, or my mom will call me, Rayan. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, kindly put them in the comment section below. We'll get to them and respond to you as usual in a timely manner. If you have ideas for other episodes, please share them because we do in fact read and respond and do craft our videos with you in mind, because you are our primary focus, and we're here to serve the interests and the appetite, of our subscribers and those who will be subscribers to this channel. Once more, Powered by Nyame, I've been your guide and host. Stay well until next time.